Amber is a gem that comes from a tree, but not today, at least 20 million years ago. In the world of gems, amber is truly unique, but it is something very special. It falls into the so-called categories of gems of organic origin, but in fact, the most important element is that it is a fossil. Amber has extremely variable and diverse datings, but it must be at least approximately 15-20 million years old to be called amber, up to even some of the oldest specimens that can reach 60 or even 70 million years, as in some cases of amber found in Burma. It is an ancient fossil resin. You have to imagine a tree just like we are used to seeing when maybe we have touched its bark with our hand and ended up a bit sticky and viscous from this substance, for example, a bit sticky. That is indeed the origin of amber many millions of years ago, primarily from conifers. A large amount of resin was produced which, falling to the ground in an environment with specific characteristics, such as began a fossilization process that specifically gave rise to amber. It must fall on grounds that have extremely high levels of humidity and have characteristics of being clayey or sandy in nature, because those are the contexts that actually allow this still tender, still very vulnerable resin to be protected from oxygen and thus begin that long, very long and intricate and complex process of transformation through fossilization. Obviously, this gives amber not only an extraordinary charm, but also characteristics that are truly, absolutely, indisputably unique. Just think, physically imagine this viscous and sticky material that very slowly, I always picture this detailed image, slides down the rough bark of a very large tree, a great and majestic conifer. It is extremely very sticky, moves downward at a very slow pace, and thus, in an almost magical manner, completely engulfs and traps many of the elements it encounters along its path. And that is why amber often provides us with traces of our planet's history that are truly wonderful indeed. It encompasses pieces of bark, soil, mosses, or bits of leaves, even insects, and in very rare cases, small vertebrates, including various types of small vertebrates. And it seals them right inside, becoming a sort of time capsule that brings them back to us in a very secure manner, almost with an incredibly faithful state of preservation. And this is an element that many of us are well familiar with, evocative even of famous films, but which have this element of truth in their origin. Amber has brought us evidence of a truly ancient and incredibly fascinating world and places it right before our very eyes, making it truly within our reach. Amber is a gem that indeed has other very interesting features and characteristics because it has a very low specific weight. It has a not very high density, and this actually means that in a saturated salt solution, in salt-saturated water, it remains suspended. So it neither floats nor sinks, it just stays suspended, almost as if it were weightless. Why is this an important element? Amber is found both by digging in deposits, in amber mines, but very often it is also found on the shoreline regions or beach areas, or even fished out with fishing nets. This is because it remains suspended in the water, and during various additional natural events like tsunamis or other turbulent conditions, it detaches from the seabed, stays suspended, and eventually washes ashore where it can be collected by people. The origins of amber as geographical locations are actually much more numerous than one might imagine, because amber, well, is very famous. But amber from the Baltic, and the Baltic itself means many things because it includes Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Russia. However, we find amber in many other places around the world precisely because it is of plant origin. The second source in terms of authority and importance is South America. In this case, we are talking about Mesoamerican amber, and the two main sources are Mexico and the Dominican Republic. Amber from the Dominican Republic also has the characteristic of showing, in some cases, a marked, distinct fluorescence, giving rise to the mythical and extremely precious blue amber. When we talk blue amber, we are actually indeed referring to Dominican amber, and it's not about the color of the amber's structure, but about a fluorescence so strong that if you manage to place the gem on a dark background or expose it to UV light, it lights up with a truly splendid blue color. In fact, actually. Here we have a very beautiful collectible specimen that I want to show you because seeing the effect of fluorescence is something extraordinary. It is a rather rare and highly valuable amber, and when you discover this almost magical phenomenon of fluorescence that lights up with such an intense color you would never expect, it is truly a beautiful, beautiful experience. In fact, there are ambers with fluorescence from other origins as well, and from the island of Java in Indonesia comes an amber that has a similar fluorescence characteristic but is less valuable and has a lower market price compared to Dominican amber, also because it is much younger. Just to give you a reference, Baltic amber is between 35 and 40 million years old, so it's quite ancient, and the fossilization process is particularly well perfected. South American amber, generally Mesoamerican, is a bit younger, around 25-30 million years old, and amber from Indonesia is definitely younger. Let's say about 20 million years and maybe even a little less. A strange case instead in Burma. This is another thing that very few people know. There are perhaps the oldest amber findings dating back up to 80 million years ago, and their incredible fossil discoveries have been made inside the amber, even the tail of a small dinosaur, truly amazing things, a wonder, which are incredibly priceless, unique, and unparalleled, invaluable as findings within amber. It stands out compared to other gems and particularly to minerals. In fact, it is not a mineral, it does not have an ordered and periodic atomic structure, but it is an amorphous material of organic origin. One interesting thing that I vividly recall, I still remember from my gemology school days, is this. If you look at a gem and see an air bubble inside, well, if it's not amber, raise your antennas because there's definitely something wrong, or it's an imitation, a glass, a synthetic. In fact, amber can contain air bubbles, and it is one of the very few cases in gemology where this possibility exists. Keep that in mind. As it can encapsulate many other things in its viscous advance, it surely also definitely traps small pockets of air. Amber also has another interesting characteristic, and that if rubbed perhaps on a wool cloth, it becomes electrically charged, has a strong characteristic of static electricity, and this has always fascinated humans throughout history, to the point of even attributing magical powers to it to the extent. And indeed, this brings us to another very important characteristic of amber within its scope. It has indeed accompanied humans since the very beginning, truly since prehistoric times. More than 20,000 years ago, amber was already perhaps being used in some way as a decorative element, as a precious item, and from there, the evidence of amber's use is endless, both in jewelry and for making cane handles and even for making tools. We truly span 360 degrees from Italy, but also the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Mycenaeans, and even the Vikings in Northern Europe, and even beyond. In short, amber has always indeed accompanied humanity with its charm and its perception as something truly extraordinarily precious. The prices of amber are very significant depending on its various factors, such as its origin, quality, and absolute naturalness. This in turn touches on another very sensitive issue because amber is a unique gem that is highly prone to being imitated. This is something to keep in mind, a question you always ask me when we talk about amber. The first issue is yes, but how do I recognize if it is really amber? Being a fossil resin, having a low specific weight, and having these color tones that can vary in a fairly wide range from almost white to a red, so intense it becomes black, through various shades of more or less intense yellow, it is very imitable even with simple plastic or with many resins, such as epoxy resins, that imitate its appearance and weight quite faithfully. And this is objectively a problem, which is why it is important to note that this imitation can occur in various forms and in different ways. Besides this, there are many pseudo-imitations because they are not really imitations, but rather in fact sophistications of amber, actually. Powders, which are byproducts of amber processing, are carefully and delicately taken and then heated and pressed, or even larger pieces are pressed at slightly higher temperatures and subsequently fused together, creating various stages of something that contains amber, but is entirely different from a specimen made entirely of untreated amber. Very often heating treatments are done, sometimes in an autoclave, with the addition of certain oils, such as linseed oil or rapeseed oil, which when put under pressure at not extremely high but sufficiently high temperatures, penetrate inside and fill certain fractures and spaces, giving the amber much greater transparency compared to its original natural state, and thus increasing its value to the eye. And this is an element to consider as more venial because it is a common practice, but it is something to be aware of. Certainly, an important element that can help in this distinction is fluorescence itself. If we notice very marked blue or green fluorescences in South American amber and Javanese amber, as we mentioned, other ambers also exhibit fluorescence. It is not guaranteed that they always do, but it is common for them to have fluorescence. Surely, though, if amber has been heated, it undoubtedly loses its fluorescence. So, it doesn't always happen, but if you find amber, even from the Baltic, and notice that it fluoresces under UV light, you can be sure that it hasn't undergone any kind of treatment. To distinguish amber from plastic, there's a very straightforward trick that many people know, but it must be done with great care and caution. You take a simple pin, heat the tip with a lighter over a candle or a flame, and try to lightly touch the amber. I recommend doing this near the hole if it's a necklace, to avoid damaging it, because that would be a real shame. If you touch the amber with the heated tip, you'll see that it starts to emit smoke, first slightly black and then turning white, and it will give off a strong scent, a strong aroma of resin or incense. Indeed, the amber will start emitting smoke, first slightly black and then turning white, and it will give off a strong scent, a strong aroma of resin or incense. That is indeed a fairly trustworthy test to actually determine with certainty if the specimen we have in hand is amber or an imitation. In fact, imitations have also become particularly sophisticated because sometimes they try to cover the outermost part of a simple plastic imitation with real amber, so that when it comes into contact with fire, it can give off the scent of the fragrance, or they are soaked in oils that can mask the smell a bit, thus trying to alter the perception to resemble amber more closely. However, that is a test that remains reliable, dependable, trustworthy, and certainly feasible. But I must emphasize caution because there is obviously the risk of compromising our precious amber. In closing, there is one last thing that I care about telling you. If the specimen we have in hand is indeed less than 4 million years old, well, it cannot be called amber at all. In that case, it is actually referred to as copal. It is very important to know that copal is a close relative of amber but is much younger. Since it is younger, the fossilization process has not been perfected. It has not reached the hardness and stability that the true fossil will achieve later, and therefore it is a completely different thing. In copal, it is much easier, precisely because it is more recent, to find the presence of even very significant insects. It is much softer, much more sensitive to temperature, loses its shine very quickly, becomes opaque, and believe it or not, it was even used in the wooden furniture industry to polish wood, so it essentially has no value. Yes, it has some value, but really negligible. However, many often try to pass off copal as genuine amber, and this is something to be very aware of. Indeed, be very aware of this. Do you realize it when you hold it in your hand by touch? Even the warmth of your fingertips is enough to cause a slight surface modification. If you don't know it, you don't pay attention and you might fall for the trick, but knowing this little tip, I believe you can be a bit more protected. As usual, knowledge always helps us. Indeed, I hope you enjoyed this video about amber. I imagine there will already be many more questions because I wasn't able to cover many aspects of the wonderful world of amber. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. As always, I will make sure to read them, and in the future we'll do a further deep dive on the topic of amber, following the guidance of your comments and requests. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel and we'll see each other very soon.